10,000 warriors clad in bronze stood in absolute silence, while 300,000 enemies blackened the horizon. These were the very same Spartans whose brothers had perished at Thermopylae just 12 months before. What unfolded next would become the most brutal act of retribution in ancient times. Within merely 6 hours, 50,000 Persian warriors would lay slain on Greek earth. The destiny of Western civilization balanced on this singular day, August 27th, 479 BC. By this video's conclusion, you'll comprehend how a modest Greek force orchestrated history's most devastating military payback, why the Persians marched directly into their snare, and the savage method that transformed disciplined warriors into ruthless killing machines. Here's what I'm about to unveil. First, the covert signal that initiated the massacre, a solitary prayer that altered everything. Second, why Pausanias deliberately allowed his troops to die of dehydration while water coursed just miles distant. And third, the precise instant Mardonius, the Persian general, understood he'd been manipulated like a complete fool. But consider this. Why did the Spartans remain still while arrows showered down upon them, slaying their brothers in battle? How did starving, parched Greeks suddenly transform into an unstoppable wave of bronze and rage? What caused veteran Persian soldiers, warriors who'd subdued half the known world, to run in utter panic? How could the globe's largest military force fall for such a transparent trap? Consider it carefully. 300,000 seasoned warriors commanded by the empire's most accomplished general marched straight into a slaughter zone. How did Greeks eliminate 50,000 foes while sacrificing only 1,000 of their own? And then there's Pausanias, the enigmatic Spartan leader who claimed divine communication, who converted military catastrophe into crushing triumph. This is his tale and the chronicle of how 10,000 warriors extracted a blood debt that would resonate through the ages. To grasp this vengeance, we must journey back to where everything originated. If you're captivated by how ancient fighters turned loss into overwhelming victory, smash that like button and subscribe for more legendary tales of military retribution. Ring the bell to experience history's bloodiest reversals. Now, allow me to transport you to that blistering August day in 479 BCE. 12 months prior, 300 Spartans had staged their iconic final stand at Thermopylae. King Leonidas and his warriors held the narrow corridor for 3 days against insurmountable odds before Persian treachery determined their doom. Every single Spartan perished, their corpses desecrated. Leonidas's head displayed on a pike. The declaration was unmistakable. Oppose Persia and confront obliteration. But the memory of that sacrifice burned in the hearts of every Greek warrior who would stand at Plataea. This wasn't just another battle. This was a reckoning postponed, a blood debt coming due with devastating interest. Now encounter the actors in this saga of revenge. First, Pausanias, the phantom commander, regent of Sparta, nephew to Leonidas, a figure who consulted oracles before each choice. Warriors murmured he could glimpse the future in sacrificial entrails. He commanded authority through enigma and fear through capability. At merely 25 years of age, he bore Sparta's dignity and his bloodline's revenge on his bronze-armored shoulders. Every decision he made carried the weight of his uncle's sacrifice, the expectations of a nation, and the responsibility for Greek survival. Facing him stood Mardonius, the power broker, Xerxes's brother-in-law, the influence behind the crown. While Xerxes escaped back to Persia following the naval catastrophe at Salamis, Mardonius remained with 300,000 of the empire's premier troops. He burned Athens, fractured the Greek coalition, and now sought to complete what Thermopylae initiated. Triumph would establish him as the most formidable man in the Persian Empire. His confidence was earned through decades of victory, his tactical brilliance proven across 100 battlefields. This made him dangerous. This also made him vulnerable to one thing he'd never encountered: a Greek commander willing to appear weak to set a trap. Then there was Aristides the Just, the Athenian leader whose metropolis lay in ruins. Persian flames had devoured the Acropolis, demolished centuries of civilization. His mission was not merely military obligation, but personal vendetta. Every Athenian warrior under his authority had forfeited homes, families, everything to Persian fires. His steadiness, his diplomatic skills, his absolute trustworthiness would prove as crucial to victory as Spartan spears. Without Aristides holding the fractious Greeks together, Pausanias's brilliant strategy would have meant nothing. The Persian Empire in 479 BCE extended from India to Egypt, from the Caucasus to Ethiopia, the most expansive empire the world had witnessed. Its war apparatus had demolished Babylon, subdued Egypt, dominated dozens of kingdoms. Their cavalry swept over battlegrounds like death incarnate. Their archers obscured skies with projectiles. Their immortals, the 10,000-strong royal guard, had never tasted defeat. This was an empire at the absolute zenith of its power, confident in its invincibility, certain that Greek resistance was merely a temporary nuisance to be crushed. Against this stood the divided Greek city-states. Sparta and Athens, perpetual adversaries, scarcely maintained their partnership. Corinthians trusted neither. Lesser cities shifted allegiances like the breeze. The sole thing binding them was Persian menace and the recent memory of incinerated homes. Athens still smoldered. Displaced persons crowded every allied settlement. The flavor of ash remained in Greek mouths. The burning of Athens had occurred just months earlier. Persians had methodically obliterated every shrine, every monument, every structure of significance. They'd contaminated wells, ruined fields, captured thousands. This wasn't mere conquest, it was cultural annihilation. Every Greek fighter at Plataea had witnessed the smoke, absorbed the accounts, knew victims. But here's where Pausanias revealed his initial brilliant maneuver. Rather than striking immediately while Greek fury blazed hot, he delayed. He assembled forces from 31 city-states, controlled their conflicts, constructed discipline from disorder. He converted emotional wrath into cold, systematic vengeance. The Spartans would claim their revenge, but on their conditions. This patience, this willingness to delay gratification for strategic advantage, marked Pausanias as something rare. A Spartan who could think like an Athenian while fighting like a Spartan. But how do you combat an adversary that outnumbers you 3-1? How do you unite Greeks who'd prefer battling each other than Persians? How do you transform defensive despair into offensive annihilation? Pausanias possessed a strategy, a terrible, ingenious strategy that would sacrifice Greek lives to preserve Greek civilization. It would require patience when men demanded action, retreat when pride demanded advance, suffering when honor demanded retaliation. It would require making his own men question his courage, His allies question his competence. His enemies overestimate their advantages. The Persian host that shadowed the plains of Plataea defied understanding. Ancient records claim 300,000 warriors. Contemporary historians debate the precise figure, but all concur it was enormous. At its foundation stood the Immortals, 10,000 elite infantry, whose designation derived from their custom of instantly replacing losses. They wore scale armor that sparkled like serpent hide, bore wicker shields, and fought with adaptability, bow, spear, and blade. These weren't just soldiers. They were the empire's elite, selected from noble families, trained from youth, equipped with the finest weapons Persian gold could buy. Backing them came the cavalry, the jewel of Persian combat, 30,000 mounted soldiers from Media, Bactria, and Persia itself. These weren't merely riders, but horse archers who could plant an arrow through a Greek eye-slit at full speed. Their tactical agility had secured dozens of victories, converting static infantry confrontations into fluid massacres. On the open expanses of Plataea, they possessed every edge. Traditional Greek phalanx warfare was designed for infantry versus infantry. It had no answer for mobile cavalry that could strike and retreat before heavy infantry could respond. The Greeks deployed 80,000 hoplites, heavy infantry that battled like human fortresses. At the nucleus stood 10,000 Spartans, not merely the celebrated 300 Royal Guard, but the complete military strength of Lacedaemon. Each Spartan drilled from age 7, existed for combat, expired for honor. Their bronze breastplates could deflect Persian arrows. Their 8-foot spears exceeded Persian armaments. Their discipline was mythical. They'd expire in formation before shattering ranks. But even Spartan courage and discipline might not be enough against Persian numbers and mobility. Athens provided 8,000 hoplites, each ablaze for retribution. Corinth dispatched 5,000, Megara 3,000. Even tiny Plataea, whose land would accommodate this apocalyptic confrontation, supplied 600 warriors. Every Greek state that still breathed free contributed what they could, but numbers reveal only partial truth. The question wasn't just numerical superiority, but tactical compatibility. How would these independent contingents, each with their own commanders and traditions, coordinate in the chaos of battle? The weapon disparity defined the engagement's character. Greeks battled with the dory, an 8-foot thrusting spear ideal for phalanx combat. Their bronze-faced Hoplon shields weighed 30 pounds, but could interconnect into an impregnable barrier. Full panoply armor, bronze breastplate, greaves, helmet, converted each hoplite into a mobile fortress. But this mass meant one thing: no withdrawal. Greeks prevailed or perished where they positioned. The weight of their equipment made rapid maneuver impossible. Once committed to battle, they couldn't disengage. Persians favored adaptability. Their spears were briefer, designed for versatile fighting. They carried wicker or leather shields, lightweight, agile, perfect for their fluid methods. Most wore linen or leather armor that exchanged protection for movement. Their genuine power resided in combined arms: arrows to weaken, cavalry to encircle, infantry to conclude. They fought like liquid. Greeks fought like granite. The question was whether liquid could wear down granite, or whether granite would shatter liquid when they finally collided. Mardonius's approach was straightforward and historically proven. Utilize Greek traitors. Thebes had aligned with Persia, supplying intelligence and 50,000 soldiers, harass with cavalry, severing supplies and water, compel the Greeks to assault uphill or perish. Then, when they shattered formation in frantic charge, Persian mobility would convert the battle into a slaughter. It had succeeded previously in a dozen battles. It should succeed again. Mardonius had no reason to doubt a tactical doctrine that had conquered half the known world. But Pausanias confronted a greater challenge than Persian numbers. The Greek alliance barely maintained cohesion. Spartans regarded Athenians as weak democrats. Athenians viewed Spartans as savage oligarchs. Corinthians trusted neither. Each contingent possessed its own leader, its own objectives, its own pride to defend. One incorrect action, one perceived insult, and the alliance would fracture. Pausanias had to oversee not merely a battle, but 31 distinct egos. He spent as much time mediating Greek disputes as planning Persian destruction. Then Pausanias executed a choice that appeared deranged. He deployed his forces not on fortifiable high terrain, but in the foothills south of Plataea, near the Asopus River. The location provided water, but revealed his flanks to cavalry. Military reasoning screamed against it, which is precisely why Mardonius would seize the bait. To the Persians, this positioning looked like amateur incompetence. To Pausanias, it was the first move in a carefully orchestrated deception. The omens arrived next. Greeks never engaged without divine consent, and Pausanias regarded this earnestly, obsessively. Every dawn he sacrificed beasts, interpreted their entrails, consulted seers. The troops grew agitated. Persians observed and mocked. What manner of general allowed sheep intestines to dictate tactics? But Pausanias waited. The gods would communicate when the snare was prepared. Or, perhaps more accurately, Pausanias would declare favorable omens when his trap was ready to spring. For 10 days, armies stared across the plains. Minor skirmishes, cavalry strikes, archer exchanges, but no general clash. Mardonius grew assured. Greeks were frightened. His cavalry dominated the field between armies. His provisions were guaranteed. Time benefited Persia. Let the Greeks roast in their bronze beneath the August sun. Soon thirst and heat would shatter their resolve. Then would arrive the slaughter. Each day confirmed his assumptions. The Greeks were paralyzed, fractured, incompetent. As dawn emerged on the 11th day, everything went awry. Day 1 elapsed in observation and assessment. Persian cavalry probed Greek positions, testing responses. Arrows soared in ranging strikes. Both armies settled into locations. But by day 2, Mardonius released his horsemen in earnest. Wave upon wave of cavalry swept over the plains, launching arrows into Greek formations, spinning away before spears could react. This was Persian warfare at its peak. Death from distance, mobility over mass. The harassment never ceased. Dawn delivered horse archers. Midday witnessed heavier cavalry assaults that retreated just beyond spear range. Twilight brought more arrows, more taunting, more psychological combat. Greeks couldn't retaliate. Their heavy infantry couldn't pursue horses. They could only stand, withstand, and hemorrhage. Each day, dozens succumbed to arrows, discovering gaps in bronze. Men died slowly, painfully, unable to strike back at their tormentors. But here's where Pausanias revealed his brilliance. He permitted it. While his troops cursed and demanded assault, he analyzed Persian patterns. While allies questioned his valor, he calculated cavalry timing. Every harassment raid taught him something. Mardonius was exposing his entire tactical repertoire. growing overconfident with each triumphant day. Pausanias was learning his enemy's habits, counting minutes between attacks, noting which units grew careless with success. Then arrived the water emergency. Persian cavalry located and contaminated the springs sustaining Greek positions. Dead horses, human waste, anything to poison water supplies. The Asopus River still flowed, but accessing it meant exposing water bearers to aero tempests. Greeks commenced rationing. In August heat, wearing 70 pounds of bronze, dehydration became a weapon deadlier than arrows. Men's lips cracked, tongues swelled, thinking became muddled. Some fainted in the heat. By day 6, Greek supply caravans couldn't break through. Persian cavalry ambushed every wagon convoy from the south. Food diminished, water barrels depleted. Warriors started collapsing from heat prostration. The Spartans preserved discipline, but other contingents wavered. Disputes erupted. Athens blamed Sparta for the vulnerable position. Corinth threatened to depart. The alliance was splintering. Pausanias was running out of time. Either the trap would spring soon, or there would be no Greeks left to spring it. What transpired next defied everything we understand about ancient combat. On the night of day 10, Pausanias commanded a general withdrawal. Not a fighting retreat, not a tactical repositioning. A complete withdrawal toward Plataea city in darkness with 80,000 warriors who'd never maneuvered together. Military scholars still debate whether he'd lost his courage or executed his deepest gambit. The orders seemed insane. Ancient armies didn't conduct complex night maneuvers. Confusion was guaranteed. Disaster seemed certain. The night march became a calamity exactly as any skilled general would anticipate. Units became separated in blackness, commands confused. The Athenians advanced too far left, the Corinthians too far right, smaller contingents dispersed between them. By sunrise, instead of a consolidated army in a fresh position, Greeks were scattered across miles in 3 isolated clusters. Amateur performance at its worst. Every Persian scout who witnessed this disorder raced back to report the incredible news. The Greek alliance had collapsed. But wait, the Spartans weren't withdrawing. They remained on their original ridge. Their commander, Amampharitus, had rejected Pausanias's command, denouncing retreat as cowardice. While other Greeks stumbled through darkness, 10,000 Spartans remained precisely where they'd begun. As dawn emerged, they stood utterly isolated, separated from all reinforcement, exposed on a gentle ridge with their backs to broken terrain. Perfect Persian cavalry ground. Perfect bait for the trap. Persian scouts couldn't credit their luck. The Greek army had disintegrated. Spartans deserted. Other contingents scattered and defenseless. They raced back to Mardonius with the astonishing news. The formidable Greek alliance had dissolved in terror. Victory was his for the seizing. Mardonius smiled. The Greeks had delivered him triumph on a silver platter. 10 days of pressure had broken their morale. Now came the harvest. He commanded his entire army forward, infantry, cavalry, everyone. Why permit any Greeks to flee? This would be total annihilation. The isolated Spartans would perish first. Then each scattered contingent would be hunted down and exterminated. By sunset, Greek resistance would be a recollection. Mardonius made his critical choice. Instead of dispatching just cavalry, he'd command his elite infantry personally. This wasn't merely tactics, it was spectacle. The nephew of Leonidas would expire where his uncle's killers observed. At 0600 hours, 300,000 Persians commenced their advance. Cavalry led, streaming toward the isolated Spartans. Behind came the immortals in their glittering scale armor. Persian allied Greeks from Thebes marched against their countrymen. The entire host moved with the confidence of predators approaching wounded quarry. This was it, the moment of decision, the fate of Western civilization marching across a Greek plain. But here's the detail historians still cannot explain. As Persians advanced, Pausanias commanded his Spartans to move slowly backward, down the reverse slope of their ridge. To Persian observation, it resembled fear. Spartans retreating without even engaging. In reality, Pausanias was adjusting his position by mere hundreds of yards onto terrain he'd studied for 10 days, into a position that would channel Persian attacks into a killing zone. The trap Pausanias had spent 10 days preparing was about to snap shut. Every error had been calculated, every retreat planned. The scattered Greek forces weren't fleeing. They were in precisely the positions Pausanias had designated. The isolated Spartans weren't abandoned, they were bait, and Mardonius, in his eagerness for glory, was about to march 300,000 warriors into the most devastating ambush of the ancient world. But the Persians didn't know that yet. At 0600 hours, Persian cavalry struck first. 10,000 horsemen sweeping toward Spartan formations in a thunder of hooves and dust. Arrows flew like horizontal rain. Ancient records claim 10,000 shafts per minute at the storm's height. The sky literally darkened as waves of missiles arced toward bronze-clad Greeks. This wasn't battle yet. It was methodical execution by arrow. The Persians were doing what they'd done successfully for 10 days, harassing static infantry with mobile firepower. Spartans raised their shields in the classic phalanx formation, each warrior's shield defending the soldier to his left, creating an interlocking wall of bronze and timber. But arrows discovered gaps. They slipped between shields, penetrated exposed thighs, found throats above breastplates. Warriors started falling. Blood slickened the parched ground. Still, the Spartans stood motionless. This was the supreme test of Spartan discipline, standing under fire, watching comrades die, unable to retaliate. What happened next defied everything we understand about ancient warfare. As casualties mounted, as comrades fell beside comrades, the Spartans didn't charge. They didn't release their own arrows. They simply stood, shields locked, dying by dozens, waiting. Persian cavalry grew emboldened, riding closer, selecting targets. Why weren't these legendary fighters fighting back? What kind of warriors stood like sheep for slaughter? Pausanias stood in the front rank, arrows shattering against his shield, performing sacrifice after sacrifice. The sacred animal's entrails kept revealing unfavorable omens. Without divine approval, Spartans wouldn't attack. Warriors cursed as friends died. Officers pleaded. Persian mockery echoed across the field. Still Pausanias sacrificed. Still the omens came back negative. Still Spartans died without striking back. Men began to wonder, had their commander lost his mind? Were they dying for nothing? The Tegean allies on the Spartan right couldn't endure it anymore. Watching friends pin-cushioned with arrows while priests played with sheep guts broke their discipline. With a roar of frustrated rage, 1,500 Tegeans broke ranks and charged the Persian cavalry. No orders, no formation, just fury and bronze rushing at their tormentors. It was suicide. It was undisciplined. It worked perfectly. That's when physics took over, and physics favored bronze. Persian cavalry, supremely confident from 10 days of harassment, had pressed too close. Now heavy infantry was among them. Horses screamed as spears found their flanks. Riders toppled into the dust, trampled by their own mounts. The Tegean charge was reckless, uncoordinated, and it shattered the Persian cavalry's confidence. For the first time in 10 days, Greeks weren't just enduring, they were killing. In that instant, 50,000 fates were sealed. Pausanias raised his arms to the sky and shouted a prayer to Hera, protector of cities. The omens suddenly turned favorable. The trap could spring. The signal every Spartan had been desperately awaiting finally came. Advance, not charge, not run. Advance, in formation, disciplined, inexorable. What the Persians witnessed next broke their spirits. 10,000 Spartans didn't charge. They walked in perfect synchronization. Bronze boots stepped forward, spears leveled, shields locked. They moved not as individuals, but as a single bronze organism, inexorable as a tide. The phalanx formation at its most terrifying. Discipline transformed into a killing machine. This was what Spartans trained their entire lives to do. This was the moment Pausanias had been waiting for. Behind the cavalry screen, Mardonius saw the Spartan advance and made his critical decision. Instead of letting horsemen continue their harassment, he ordered them aside and brought up his elite infantry. The Immortals would meet the Spartans head-on. Scale armor against bronze. Persian courage against Greek discipline. This would be the collision that decided everything. Two elite forces, two military traditions, two civilizations meeting in primal combat. The armies met with a crash that ancient writers claimed could be heard for miles. Bronze spearheads met wicker shields. Persian scimitars sparked against Greek bronze. The initial impact staggered both lines. Warriors in the front ranks died instantly, crushed between the pressure of their own armies. Then came the grinding melee that would define ancient warfare, the push of shields, the desperate stabbing over and under, the crushing weight of thousands of warriors compressed into a few hundred yards of frontage. But here's where Spartan superiority showed. Their 8-foot spears outreached Persian weapons by 2 feet. Doesn't sound like much until you're trying to kill someone who can stab you first. Their bronze armor turned Persian sword cuts. Their lifetime of training showed in economical thrusts that found every gap in Persian defense. Most crucially, their formation held. Where Persians fought as brave individuals, Spartans fought as a machine. Individual courage versus collective discipline. Discipline won. The killing that followed shocked even the Spartans. Persian elite troops, the feared immortals who'd conquered half the world, were being systematically butchered. Their scale armor, proof against arrows, offered no protection against thrusting spears. Their shorter weapons couldn't reach past the Greek spear hedge. They died in windrows, bodies piling so high that living Persians had to climb over dead comrades to reach the fight. The Immortals, who had never known defeat, were learning what defeat felt like. Mardonius, watching his center crumbling, made the decision that would end an empire's dreams. Mounting his white stallion, surrounded by 1,000 picked cavalry, he personally entered the battle. This was the ancient way. Leaders led from the front. His golden armor blazed in the morning sun. His presence rallied wavering Persians. For a brief moment, the battle hung in balance. One man's courage might tip the scales. But wait, the Spartans weren't alone anymore. While all Persian attention focused on the Spartan struggle, the scattered Greek contingents had reformed. The Athenians crushed the Theban traitors on the Persian left. Corinthians and others swept around the Persian right. What Mardonius thought was a broken army fleeing, in darkness had been a coordinated redeployment. The retreat that looked like panic was deliberate deception. Pausanias had played him perfectly. Then came the sound that froze Persian blood, the Spartan paean, their battle hymn, taken up by 80,000 Greek throats. The hunters had become the hunted. Persian confidence shattered as they realized the trap's magnitude. They weren't pursuing scattered fugitives. They were surrounded by a coordinated Greek army that had played them perfectly. Everything they thought they knew was wrong. In the center, the critical moment arrived. As Mardonius led another charge, trying to break the Spartan line through personal heroism, a Spartan soldier named Aemnestus spotted the Persian commander. What happened next would echo across 25 centuries. Aemnestus hefted a stone, not a spear, not a sword, but a simple rock, and hurled it with desperate strength. The stone struck Mardonius in the head, crushing his skull despite his golden helmet. The Persian commander toppled from his white stallion, dead before he hit the ground. In that instant, Persian morale didn't just break, it disintegrated. Their commander dead, surrounded by reformed Greeks, facing the inexorable Spartan advance, the greatest army in the world became a terrified mob. Command structure collapsed. Units lost cohesion. Individual survival replaced tactical coordination. The Persian army wasn't retreating. It was fleeing in absolute panic. But the real horror was just beginning. As Persians turned to flee, they found retreat nearly impossible. The very cavalry that had been their strength now blocked their escape. Horses and warriors tangled in desperate flight. Formation collapsed into every man for himself chaos, and behind them came the Greeks, not pursuing but hunting. Methodical as wolves culling sheep. This wasn't battle anymore. This was slaughter. The next 10 minutes would become legend. Spartans didn't break formation to pursue. They advanced in their phalanx, killing everything in their path. Fleeing Persians had two choices: stand and die fighting, or run and die with spears in their backs. Most chose to run. The killing ground extended for miles as lighter Greek troops ran down fugitives. Persian corpses carpeted the earth so thickly that Greeks had to walk on bodies. Blood turned the dust to mud. The wounded were given no quarter. This wasn't war anymore, but extermination. Revenge served at industrial scale. Every dead Spartan at Thermopylae was being paid for in Persian blood with crushing interest. Every burned Athenian home avenged. Every defiled temple answered. Some Persians tried to make a stand at their fortified camp, hastily throwing up defenses. It only delayed the inevitable. Greeks surrounded the camp, scaled its walls, broke its gates. What followed inside those walls made the field battle look merciful. Trapped Persians were slaughtered like cattle in a pen. No surrender was offered or accepted. The camp became a charnel house that reeked of death for months afterward. Suddenly, the hunters became the hunted everywhere. Greek cavalry, inferior to Persian in open warfare, excelled at running down scattered infantry. Local Greeks, who'd hidden during Persian occupation, emerged to kill stragglers. Boys with farming tools attacked exhausted soldiers. The roads north became corridors of death, stretching for miles. Everyone with a grudge against Persia got their revenge today. But Pausanias had saved his deadliest move for last. He'd positioned Greek reserves not to support the battle but to block escape routes. Fleeing Persians found their retreat paths sealed by fresh Greek troops. The careful positioning during the chaotic retreat now revealed its purpose, creating a killing box from which escape was nearly impossible. The trap was complete. Pausanias had thought of everything. Only one Persian commander kept his head. Artabazus, commanding 40,000 troops on the Persian left, saw Mardonius fall and immediately ordered withdrawal. Not a fighting retreat, not a last stand. He ran while the center and right dissolved in slaughter. Artabazus force-marched his troops north, abandoning equipment, wounded, everything except speed. He would reach Asia with most of his force intact, the only Persian success in a day of catastrophe. As the sun climbed toward noon, the battle was over. The killing would continue until darkness. The Persian camp's wooden palisades offered no protection against Greek vengeance. Athenians reached it first, their rams splintering gates while defenders desperately tried to hold walls designed for temporary shelter, not siege warfare. When barriers broke, what poured through wasn't an army anymore. It was retribution incarnate. These Athenians had watched their city burn, their temples desecrated. Now came payback. Inside, 50,000 Persians packed together like fish in a net. Noble cavalry abandoned horses to fight on foot. Immortals formed desperate squares. Common soldiers pressed against walls, trampled comrades, clawed at ramparts trying to escape. Greek spears turned the crowded space into an abattoir. Warriors couldn't swing swords in the press. They could only die. The Spartans arrived next, marching through shattered gates in perfect formation. Even now, where Athenians killed in rage, Spartans killed with mechanical efficiency. They formed lines, advanced steadily, speared everything that moved. No passion, no hurry, just workmanlike slaughter. Their bronze-faced advance pushed Persians into tighter groups where death came easier. They were still in formation, still disciplined, still perfectly Spartan. What archaeologists found there still disturbs researchers. Mass graves containing thousands, many showing defensive wounds, hands severed trying to grab spears, skulls crushed by shield edges, bones bearing marks of systematic execution. The evidence suggests killing continued long after resistance ended. This wasn't battle but deliberate annihilation. The Greeks wanted no Persian survivors to threaten them again. One Persian noble offered 300 talents of gold for his life, enough to fund a city for years. A Spartan speared him mid-offer. Treasures that could buy kingdoms lay scattered in blood and mud. Greeks had come for vengeance, not gold. Every Persian corpse was another payment for Thermopylae, another answer to Athens's ashes. Gold could be taken from corpses just as easily as from living men. By afternoon, the slaughter statistics defied belief. Persian dead covered the ground so thickly that accurate counting proved impossible. Conservative estimates placed enemy losses at 50,000 plus, the cream of Persian nobility, the core of their professional army, the sons of their greatest families, all fed Greek spears. Entire administrative structures died in those fields. Persian power in the west died with them. Greek losses, barely 1,000 total. The Spartans lost 91 warriors, Athens 52, Tegea 16. The casualty ratio, 50-1, stands among the most lopsided in military history. How does an army lose 50,000 while killing only 1,000? The answer lay in the trap's perfection, the terrain's choice, and Greek discipline holding against Persian flexibility, but also in the ruthlessness of Greek revenge. Pausanias found Mardonius's body among the carnage. The Persian commander lay where he'd fallen, golden armor blood-caked, skull crushed by Amnestus's stone. Some urged Pausanias to mutilate the corpse as Persians had done to Leonidas. He refused. "We are Greeks, not barbarians. The dead have paid their price." Mardonius received proper burial, the only mercy shown that day. But this wasn't battle anymore, it was extermination. Fleeing Persians were hunted through forests, killed at river crossings, tracked to exhaustion. Local Greeks emerged from hiding to claim revenge for years of occupation. Persian stragglers faced farmers' scythes, shepherds' clubs, women's knives. The roads to Asia became killing paths marked by unburied dead. The vengeance extended far beyond the battlefield. The Theban collaborators faced special fury. These Greeks who'd sided with Persia, who'd fought against their countrymen, received no mercy. Their leaders were executed publicly. Others were branded, enslaved, exiled. Thebes itself barely avoided destruction. Greek vengeance on Greeks proved almost as brutal as on Persians. Betrayal of Greece carried the ultimate price. As news spread, Greek cities erupted in celebration. Athens was avenged, Sparta's honor restored. The Persian threat that had loomed for a generation vanished in an afternoon. Temples filled with thanksgiving, streets rang with victory songs. But Pausanias, surveying the carnage, perhaps understood what he'd unleashed. Greece was free. Unity was already fracturing. The enemy that bound them was dead. From Persian weapons, Greeks forged a memorial, the serpent column, 3 intertwined bronze snakes supporting a golden tripod. On it, they inscribed the names of the 31 cities that fought for freedom. It stood for centuries at Delphi, reminding Greeks of their finest hour. Today, its remains stand in Istanbul, a 2,500-year-old testimony to the price of freedom. The killing didn't stop until darkness made it impossible to distinguish friend from foe. Even then, Greeks with torches hunted survivors through the night. Dawn revealed a landscape transformed into a necropolis. Bodies stretched for miles. Scavenger birds darkened the sky. The stench would linger for months, despite mass cremations. Plataea had become a monument to what humans could do to each other. Freedom was won. Unity was lost. The external threat that had forced Greek cooperation died with Mardonius. Now Sparta and Athens, no longer united against Persia, would turn on each other. The victory at Plataea didn't begin a golden age. It started a countdown to the Peloponnesian War that would destroy both powers. Sometimes the deadliest enemy is the one you defeat. But on that August day, none of that mattered. Greece had answered Thermopylae. Every one of Leonidas's 300 had been paid for with interest written in Persian blood. The age of Persian expansion westward ended in 6 hours of disciplined savagery. Democracy, philosophy, Western civilization itself survived because Pausanias waited for favorable omens while his troops died. Greece was free, but freedom would prove more dangerous than slavery. The Persian Empire never again threatened Greek independence. Xerxes retreated to his palaces, his dreams of Western conquest buried with 50,000 of his best soldiers. Within decades, a Macedonian named Alexander would use Greek military methods to conquer Persia itself. Plataea hadn't just stopped Persian expansion, it reversed history's flow. Greek unity lasted exactly as long as the victory celebration. With the external threat removed, old rivalries exploded with renewed intensity. Sparta returned to its conservative isolation, suspicious of change, fearful of the Helot population that outnumbered Spartan citizens. Athens used its new prestige to build an empire of its own, transforming defensive allies into tribute-paying subjects. Within 50 years, these former allies would fight the devastating Peloponnesian War, bleeding each other white over decades of brutal conflict. Victory's price included the seeds of self-destruction. The irony was lost on no one. Greeks had defeated the greatest empire in the world, only to turn their spears on each other. The discipline that won Plataea, the unity that made victory possible, the sacrifice that saved civilization, all forgotten in the scramble for power and prestige. Human nature, it seemed, was more dangerous than Persian armies. Pausanias himself embodied this tragedy. The architect of Greece's greatest victory grew corrupted by fame and ambition. He secretly negotiated with Persians, dreamed of personal power, betrayed everything he'd fought for. He began wearing Persian dress, adopting Persian customs, corresponding with Persian officials about becoming a Persian satrap. The man who saved Greece wanted to rule it as a Persian puppet. The Spartans eventually discovered his treachery. When they came to arrest him, Pausanias fled to a temple seeking sanctuary. The Spartans, unwilling to violate sacred ground by killing him inside, walled up the entrance and waited for him to starve. His own mother reportedly placed the first stone. The hero of Plataea died slowly, alone, entombed by his own people. It was an ignoble end for a brilliant commander, a reminder that character matters more than tactical genius. Some historians see poetic justice in Pausanias's fate. The man who used deception so brilliantly against Persia was ultimately undone by his own deceptions. The commander who understood psychology well enough to manipulate an entire army failed to understand his own soul. Power corrupted him as thoroughly as Persian arrows failed to kill him. His tragedy was complete. Yet Plataea's echo resonates across 2,500 years. When Winston Churchill spoke of the few defeating the many during the Battle of Britain, he channeled Plataea's spirit. When military academies teach concentration of force and the decisive point, they cite Pausanias's patient trap. When strategists discuss deception operations, Plataea remains the gold standard. The principle remains eternal. Superior tactics and motivation can overcome overwhelming numbers when properly applied. Consider the lesson's modern relevance. Technology changes warfare's face, but human nature doesn't. Disciplined defenders fighting for home, understanding their terrain intimately, can still confound larger invaders with superior equipment. From Napoleon's disastrous invasion of Russia to America's struggles in Vietnam and Afghanistan, Plataea's fundamental truth endures. Moral factors can outweigh material advantage. The Battle of Plataea teaches us that patience can be the deadliest weapon. Pausanias endured 10 days of harassment, watching his men die, accepting criticism from allies, appearing weak to enemies, all to set the perfect trap. Modern strategists call this operational patience, the willingness to accept tactical setbacks for strategic victory. It's rare. Most commanders lack the nerve. Plataea also demonstrates the power of psychological warfare. Pausanias didn't just defeat Persian bodies, he broke Persian minds. By appearing incompetent, retreating chaotically, leaving units isolated, he created the conditions where Mardonius made fatal mistakes. The Persians defeated themselves as much as Greeks defeated them. Sun Tzu would have approved. The battle saved more than Greece. Had Persia won, no Athenian democracy would have flourished to inspire future republics. No Socrates questioning assumptions, challenging conventional wisdom, teaching young men to think critically. No Plato exploring ideal forms of government and justice. No Aristotle systematizing logic and science. The intellectual revolution that birthed Western philosophy died in its cradle. Roman Republic would have faced Persian satrapies instead of Greek city-states. Rome learned from Greek culture, adopted Greek arts and philosophy, built upon Greek foundations. A Persian-dominated Mediterranean would have shaped Rome differently, if Rome emerged at all. Christianity would have emerged into a different world entirely, shaped by Persian Zoroastrianism rather than Greek philosophy. Every aspect of Western development pivoted on those 6 hours. Democratic ideals, philosophical inquiry, scientific method, artistic traditions, all trace roots to Greek civilization that survived because Pausanias set a perfect trap. We live in a world shaped by Plataea's outcome. Had 50,000 Persians killed 80,000 Greeks instead of the reverse, you wouldn't be reading these words in this language, thinking these thoughts, valuing these ideals. But perhaps the deepest lesson is darker. Plataea showed that civilized humans could become killing machines when pushed too far. Those disciplined Spartans who stood stoically under arrow storms became merciless executioners who gave no quarter. Those democratic Athenians from the city of Socrates and Pericles became vengeful slaughterers who burned Persian prisoners alive. The thin line between soldier and butcher vanished when revenge mixed with opportunity. This transformation disturbs us because it reveals uncomfortable truths about human nature. We like to think civilization makes us fundamentally different from our ancestors, that education and culture have tamed our savage instincts. Plataea suggests otherwise. Given sufficient provocation, sufficient cause, sufficient opportunity, civilized humans revert to primal violence. The veneer is thinner than we admit. The Greeks at Plataea weren't monsters. They were farmers, craftsmen, merchants, poets, ordinary men driven to extraordinary violence by circumstance. They had watched cities burn, families die, cultures destroyed. When opportunity for revenge arrived, they took it with enthusiasm that shocks modern sensibilities. The question isn't whether they were wrong to seek vengeance. The question is whether we would act differently in their position. Modern military historian Victor Davis Hanson called Plataea the most important battle you've never heard of. He's absolutely right. Thermopylae got the glory, the movies, the cultural recognition. Heroic defeat makes better stories than brutal victory. We remember the 300 who died gloriously. We forget the 10,000 who killed efficiently. But Plataea delivered results. It wasn't pretty, wasn't noble, wasn't cinematic. It was effective. 50,000 dead enemies are more persuasive than 300 martyrs, however brave. Leonidas's sacrifice bought time and created propaganda. Pausanias's victory ended the threat. Both were necessary. Both played their parts in saving Greek civilization. History tends to romanticize the former while forgetting the latter. But ask yourself, which mattered more? 10,000 Spartans had indeed avenged their 300 brothers, extracting a blood price that still shocks 25 centuries later. Every Thermopylae defender was paid for 166 times over in Persian corpses. In pure mathematical terms, this might be history's most complete military revenge. Leonidas was avenged so thoroughly that Persia never forgot the lesson. Persian expansion westward ended permanently. The empire that conquered from India to Ethiopia learned its limits on a Greek battlefield. The revenge was personal and collective simultaneously. Individual Spartans avenged uncles, brothers, fathers who died at Thermopylae. Collectively, Sparta restored its honor, proved its military supremacy, validated its brutal training system. The message to the world was clear: attack Sparta and face not just defeat, but annihilation. The 300 died to deliver that message. The 10,000 made it stick. For Athens, Plataea provided different catharsis. Their city was ash, their temples rubble, their culture scattered. But they stood at Plataea, fought alongside Spartans, proved their courage matched their democratic ideals. Athens lost its physical buildings, but preserved its spirit. Within decades, they would rebuild greater than before. The Parthenon, the democracy's golden age, the philosophical revolution, all grew from ashes fertilized by Persian blood at Plataea. Standing on Plataea's fields today, you see only farmland. No monuments mark where empires collided, where civilization was saved, where 50,000 men died in 6 hours. But the ground remembers. Every harvest brings up arrowheads, spear points, fragments of bone. Local farmers find bronze pieces, rusted iron, bits of Persian gold. The earth itself testifies to the price of freedom, paid in full one August day when patience became slaughter. Modern visitors walk those fields ignorant of what happened there. They see wheat growing, tourists snapping photos, perhaps a small historical marker. They don't feel the weight of what occurred. They can't imagine the screaming, the blood, the terror as Persian confidence transformed into Greek vengeance. The ground absorbed it all: blood, tears, screams, triumph, horror, and grew silent. But history remembers. Scholars study Pausanias's tactics. Military officers learn from his patient deception. Philosophers debate the ethics of such complete revenge. Plataea remains relevant because it reveals fundamental truths about warfare, human nature, and civilization's fragility. We're never as far from barbarism as we'd like to believe. The 300 died as heroes, immortalized in poetry, art, and film. The 10,000 killed as professionals, largely forgotten except by military historians. Both were necessary. Both extracted their price. Both served Greek survival. History remembers the martyrs, but was shaped by the victors. This distinction matters because it reveals what we value versus what works. We celebrate heroic sacrifice because it inspires us, gives meaning to death, suggests something transcendent in human nature. We're uncomfortable with efficient killing because it reveals something savage in that same nature. But survival often requires both. The 300 bought time with their deaths. The 10,000 bought safety with Persian deaths. Civilization survived because Greeks were willing to do both. At Plataea, Western civilization was saved by warriors willing to become monsters for one afternoon. That's the uncomfortable truth beneath freedom's foundation. Sometimes survival requires savagery. Sometimes honor demands dishonor. Sometimes civilization must embrace barbarism to prevent barbarism's triumph. The Spartans understood this paradox instinctively.